the culture of fear in education and in school districts it's unbelievable.
We talked about the curriculum and how the curriculum has just fallen apart, and that you can't discipline kids anymore. She also talked about this gender problem and how she dealt with it, how she listened, but changed the subject, and often the really young kids would just leave it. They were just looking for attention somehow. And since then, the other teachers in that school are terrified of what was going to be on this podcast, and they were threatening to take action against me.
People afraid to stand up to their friends and their neighbors and their families. Not stand up and fight, but just stand for truth. Just stand and speak up for what you know is true.
Tina, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you.
Oh, well, it's an honor to interview you. I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and I don't know, Jordan said you should follow this woman. And so I have been. And, I'm trying to talk to mostly women. I want to help young women, but all women, find a better way in the world. And I think we've been misled from a lot of the narrative that comes from places of resentment and other, self-willed places that haven't been good for us. And so I want to talk to women who have put themselves out there and have a voice and have learned whatever they've learned. And so I'd like you to, introduce yourself and tell my audience who you are and what you're doing.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I talk a lot about our organization, Moms for Liberty, which, I hope we'll get into. But
yes,
I haven't spent a lot of time discussing my journey as a woman and having children. And this is my second marriage, 17 years. And the second one doing much better around this time. But there's things you learn along the way and in your growth and your development. So that should be fun to talk about. My name is Tina Descovich. I'm the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. It's a national nonprofit in the United States.
How long ago did that?
My co-founder and I, Tiffany Justice, we started it together. We launched it January 1st, 2021. So we're not even 3 years old yet.
Okay, well, and you're famous. I would say.
I don't know about that. It is interesting because we're here in London. I've never been to London before. Meeting people from all over the world right now. And I say, I'm co-founder of Moms for Liberty. And then we love Moms for Liberty. Somebody from Spain, somebody from Germany, somebody. So it's just remarkable that somebody from another country would know of this organization that's not even 3 years old. Anyway, Tiffany and I were both former school board members. We're both moms. We didn't know each other until this organization.
From the same place?
No, different counties. We lived about an hour from each other. We served on different school boards. When COVID happened, we kept kind of showing up in our local newspapers because we were going against the grain in a lot of votes in our districts. And so we reached out to each other to discuss some of the things that were going on and realized that we had the same view on a lot of the issues we were facing.
And what were some of those issues that brought you together?
First, we wanted schools open. As quickly as possible. And there were a lot of people at that time, even in Florida, even in a very conservative community, that were terrified to open schools. But we had been studying the research for months at that point of what was happening around the world for those that, COVID had already hit other countries and they'd already put children back in school, and children, they were not being affected. They weren't being impacted the way adults were. And so we were both fighting to open schools quickly. And so that was the first line in the sand, and then we were both getting a lot of criticism. We wanted kids to die.
What was it like getting all that criticism?
It wasn't unusual for me. I had served for almost 4 years at that point, and I served during a period of time 2 years prior. The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Broward County, Florida, had a shooting. And it was very traumatic for our state. And so our state at that point had passed a lot of laws about school security, and then one of those things were allowing districts to decide if they were going to arm with a gun staff in the school and potentially even teachers. And so our school district was debating that heavily. And so it was very controversial. We had hundreds, if not 1,000 protesters week after week in our meetings. I took a stand that I wanted not teachers, but some school district staff that had prior law enforcement experience. I wanted them to be able to train to conceal carry in the schools. And that was not very popular with a lot of people. And so that was my first experience with showing up to a meeting and people laying on the ground, pouring ketchup on their body, holding tombstones, saying, Tina wants me to die. And it was a little unnerving, I will be honest. And I just thought, these people don't know me at all. I care so deeply. I've studied what happened at this, I formed my opinions out of studying what happened and studying the research and seeing what's going on. And let's have a debate about it, but let's sit down and discuss this.
And there wasn't any of that?
There was a lot of fear. And so it was pre-COVID days, but it was the same type of mentality. I met with everyone that wanted to meet. Some moms from Moms Demand Action wanted to sit down, and I did. I sat down with them. But they were so fearful. And some of the fears, they weren't rational.
Right.
I remember one mom literally with tears in her eyes. She said, I can't imagine the lunch lady who has arthritis all in her hands and can't even hold a dollar bill. Well, I can't imagine her shooting a gun at my kid's school. And I was like,
she probably wouldn't.
She wouldn't be. She would never be approved for it. She would never pass the 172 hours of intensive training. But, it was their kids, and moms get very emotional about their children. So that was my first experience with a lot of rage and hate. And they found me on Twitter at that point. A lot of the activists and were just attacking me day in and day out.
How did you deal with that?
You have to do a lot of self-reflection. You have to do a lot of figuring out who you are. You have to know what you believe. It's very hard to stand in opposition unless you know what you believe and why you believe it.
So did you write those things down?
Absolutely.
What did you do?
Yeah, I did. That's interesting that you asked that. Yeah, writing for me puts it into my memory. I'm sure there's some science behind that, and I don't really know what it is. But sometimes even before media interviews now, we do a lot of media interviews, and I want to have certain talking points. I can think through them and I know what I want to say, but until I write it down, and I don't have to read it, I don't ever look at it, but just writing it down, and now I can speak to it from memory. It's remarkable.
Well, when I go on stage with Jordan, I spend the day, usually I'm commenting on a rule. I'll read the rule and then I'll self-reflect on that rule. And I'll write down what I think, but then when I go out on stage, I don't take it with me.
But I write it all down. Yeah. That's the same thing I do. Sometimes I'll write down a whole speech of what I would want to say if I was going to read it and then just leave it somewhere, but it just somehow puts it in your memory.
And how do people respond when you don't read from a piece of paper? Have you noticed that there's a difference?
There's a big difference.
Yeah, and what do you think the difference is?
They feel more connected.
Yeah, there is. There's some sort of connection. So you can't read. Reading just doesn't. The people are there. You're reading something. They're disconnected from what you're saying.
Even if you do the look up every minute, and you do all the things they tell you when you learn to give a speech. Look up, look around, then you can read more. If you still connect really with people. There's a couple things about speaking that I've learned in the last couple of years doing a lot of public speaking. The not reading is key, and the pauses.
Right.
Jordan pauses like nobody's business. Sometimes they're like, it's the uncomfortable pause. You wonder what's coming, but just a pause. And when you really look and connect, sometimes you'll see tears in the audience. You'll see people shaking their head, and you get that feedback into you. And for me, it helps propel an energy in me to continue.
Yeah, that pause. I mean, learning to pause in uncomfortable moments is also quite profound, or can be quite profound. If you pause long enough, it will be. And I've learned that later in my life too, is that if I'm upset by something is bothering me, instead of reacting, to pause and to wait for the emotions to settle before. And even then, to wait for the proper moment to speak, because you might have something reactionary to say, and you don't know if you should say it or not, especially if it's someone that you have a relationship with. So the best thing to do is to just let it go. It's like shelve it. And then sometimes what I wanted to say will be said, but not when I've decided to say it. So it'll come out in a conversation that won't cause any trouble, because it came out when ought to come out, when it was really, I think, God's decision. I would have forgot it if it wasn't important, but if it is, then it comes back out. I find that kind of thing fascinating.
No, I love that. I have an uncanny ability to just take a lot in. Rage, anger, hate, people screaming, crying.
What do you do with it? Where does it go?
It just rolls off like a duck.
Rolls out.
Just rolls off like a duck. I learned that I served on school board. One teacher negotiations, hundreds of teachers in there that I care deeply about. A lot of them, my children have had them as teachers. Very upset because they're not getting the raise that they want. And I know the budgeting constraints, and I have to make hard decisions. And they're chanting and yelling and angry face. And feeling like I don't care about them because I have to vote against this raise or for lesser of a raise. And when it's personal, it's a little bit harder. But also, just I don't even know how to say. So I took the personality test.
Yes. I understand myself.
No, that one. And the one, the emotional word. I can't think of the category for them.
Well, if you're emotionally stable.
Yeah,
or
mine was
less emotionally stable.
Yeah, but there's one of those categories that's do you react emotionally to things?
Yeah,
and mine was literally one.
Oh yeah, so you're really emotionally stable.
Yeah, it was the ability for people to throw all that at me, and I don't feel rage, I don't feel anger, I look at them. And I will say, I do feel like it's a blessing from God. Like, I hear a voice almost tell me, like, this isn't about you.
Oh, wow. Like, that's good.
This isn't about you. She's scared.
Do you think you learned that from when you were a child? Or was it just...
Yes, I had a very difficult, challenging childhood. And so I think I can remember even being a young child and trying to figure out how to process sometimes the chaos around me.
Yeah.
And sometimes just having to figure it out so that I could remain safe. Basically safe in my own mind and my own. So I think that is something I learned as a child. But as an adult, it's such a blessing to see somebody losing their cool and not to have to react, but just to
see that personally.
Yeah, not take it personal.
Really, really good. If you have a number of different things, like, don't take it personally. Take what you want and leave the rest. There's all these things. Easy does it. All these that you can use, and you think, those are just those
quips or something. Like,
who needs that kind of thing? It sounds trivial. But it's funny how something simple like that can, when your mind is racing or there's a whole bunch going on, that something simple like that, really short and succinct, can bring you back to yourself so that you don't misstep.
So at Moms for Liberty, we adopted the term early on, joyful warrior, because we are under, we just discussed that I can take all of that and just let it roll. But we have 130,000 moms around the country.
130,000.
And most of them aren't built like I am in that sense. And so we adopted early on the term joyful warrior because we want to fight. We want to fight for our kids, the future of our country, the future of our children. But we have to do it in a joyful way. We have to do it with a smile on our face. We have to do it in a civil way. And so it's where I'm tying the story into what we're talking about is we were in the capital of Florida, supporting a bill that was getting passed a few months ago with a lot of our moms from Florida. And Antifa showed up and with their usual tactics.
So you're getting famous.
Full of rage. They follow us every time we have an event. They seem to show up full of rage, chanting, screaming, yelling, doing the things they do. And our moms are not used to this at all. They're not political. They haven't even been politically active. Some of them never even voted. They're just moms that are concerned about their kids. Antifa, like 15 or 20 members, had surrounded 3 of them and backed them up against a wall and a door. Security was behind the door, and so they were knocking on the door like, let us in. But before security got the door to pull them in to safety, one of them poked and shoved hard one of our moms. And I'm smiling because later when she was talking to me, she said, I just kept hearing in my mind, be a joyful warrior, be a joyful warrior, be a joyful warrior. So it didn't come natural to her for it to roll, but we've been talking to them so much about be a joyful warrior. Like, don't give in to that, to what's going on around you. And it seems to be working. So,
well, that's really good. That's a very good message.
yeah.
And so are you dealing then with the things that everyone's dealing with in school, the gender ideology, the critical race theory, all those things?
Yeah, so our mission statement is to unify, educate, and empower parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. When we were on school board, we saw that government at all levels was overstepping, overreaching into the family unit. A lot of LGBTQ support guides were appearing in the state of Florida while we were serving, which in a support guide means it didn't go in front of the school board. So somehow these support guides were getting put in the school districts, put in place without being voted on by elected representatives.
So by fiat, it's put in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so the public never saw them. School board members never saw them. And the problem is these guides were saying that school employees and teachers needed to help children pick a name, a pronoun, restroom, where they're even going to sleep in overnight field trips.
Yeah.
And then some of these procedural guides even said, lie to parents, like use birth name, use birth pronoun. And so we started seeing that and thought, once government entities insert themselves in between parent and child relationships, we're doomed. We're done.
Yeah,
like it brings up the family, and it puts a wedge in the family, and then society's done because it's just, this is really, really bad.
Yeah.
And so Moms for Liberty was created to defend parental rights, to empower parents to see what's going on and stand up for that. Tiffany are former school board members, so we saw how much that was happening at the school district level. And we believe that's where it's happening the worst right now in our country, at least. And so we have our, in America, we have all of our school board members are elected, which isn't the same around the world, unfortunately. It should be. So that education is handled locally like that. So we, our chapters around the country, they pull down school board agendas and we tell them to review them with a fine-tooth comb, figure out what your concerns are in your community and formulate a plan to make change. And so it's remarkable what they address, but it varies all over the country. Some places it's critical race theory, some it's gender ideology. Sometimes it's a failing education system. In America right now, only a third of fourth graders are reading on grade level. We have the lowest reading scores since the 1980s, the lowest math scores ever recorded in the history.
Oh, do they not do? Are they not teaching reading and math?
They've been teaching reading poorly for a long time.
Yeah, when I was in the 80s, I went to university and I took a kinesiology degree, which is a phys ed science of the body and education. So I guess the education and the phys ed go together. And even between 83 and 87, they were teaching learning styles in education that were useless as far as I could tell. And so it's been a very long time that the education system hasn't been just teaching math and teaching English and teaching social studies.
Teaching phonics for the longest time.
Whole word.
Whole world. Yeah, just trying these things, whatever new and shiny, getting rid of the things that have worked for hundreds of years. Yeah. And our kids are suffering because of it.
Our kids are suffering. And so 50% of grade 4s aren't?
2/3 are not.
2/3 are not. More than 50%.
Yeah. Some of our school districts, like in our inner cities, there's whole schools where nobody is on grade level with reading or math. It's really, really awful. And it's the biggest crisis in our country and for the future of our country.
Yeah. And so do you guys propose that they're taught different ways, or?
Yeah, I think we're moving in that direction. We don't have our own curriculum, and we don't point to specific curriculums.
You right just now, bring up the problems?
Yeah, right now we're trying to shine a light on what's happening because Americans don't know. Americans think that they have this kind of idyllic vision of what school was like for them when they were a child. I loved my first grade teacher. I got a great education. They don't understand that comprehensive sex ed is being introduced. Yeah. Pleasure-based sex ed in some areas is being introduced. When I think of sex ed, I go back to a film strip. It was about biology. It beeped, the egg and the sperm. And it's very biological. It's not like that anymore.
No.
And so parents don't know. They don't know. They don't know what books their children are being exposed to that teach different ideologies that they never would have introduced to them in their home. And so right now, I think we're working hard at exposing to get the word out. Because I think once people are awake and understand what's happening, I know once people are awake and understand what's happening, they can't sit down and be silent.
Yeah. I don't see how teachers are putting up with this. I've interviewed a teacher who'd been teaching for 51 years in the school system in Toronto, and she decided, okay, I'm done. I won't get hired anymore. I'm a sub-teacher now. I'm retired, but they won't hire me now, but I'm going to talk about this. After she'd seen my husband talk, she thought, I'm going to stand up. So we talked about the curriculum and how the curriculum has just fallen apart, and that you can't discipline kids anymore. And she also talked about this gender problem and how she dealt with it, how she listened, but changed the subject. And often the really young kids would just leave it. They were just looking for attention somehow, and she could just change the subject, and then, that would just disappear. And so we had a really good conversation. But since then, the other teachers in that school are terrified of what was going to be on this podcast. And they were threatening to take action against me. They were so scared. Just the teachers themselves in the schools, everyone's so fearful. Everybody is so fearful.
The culture of fear in education and in school districts it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand it, to be honest, but it's a very localized thing.
Divided somehow, I think, because you're going to be fearful if you don't think you're supported.
Yeah, they're afraid of their administration. They're afraid of their school board. They're afraid of their own teachers union. There's so much fear.
Yeah.
And so they're almost paralyzed. I have teachers reach out to me all the time. They don't want to teach this nonsense. They are put in terrible situations with a lot of these gender policies.
Yeah.
For example, a teacher called me from my own district a few months ago. It's probably more than that now. It was before the state passed the law that this isn't happening in Florida anymore.
Yes, that's good.
But he had a student in his class that he had known since he was born. And he knew the parents well and saw them outside of school, which happens often in local communities.
Yeah.
But the student at school now wanted to be known as a girl. And the school district policy said, you will, as a teacher, call Henry Susie.
Right.
And say she. And now this teacher was put into a situation, and you won't tell the parents. But he knew the parents very well. And so after school, Henry, during school, Sarah,
how confusing.
The situation.
Yeah.
The most absurd and ridiculous thing. Lying. Teaching the kids to lie, putting a wedge between the family, hurting personal relationships. Completely unnecessary.
Yeah. And why do you think that we've gone so far astray from what we knew was what was true? Why have we gone down this path and people are going along with that they have no defense to fight against it? What's missing, do you think? Something's missing. Otherwise, they'd have the courage to stand up against it. Teachers would. And wouldn't let it happen.
It's not just teachers, parents. Everybody's so fearful. You saw it during COVID. People afraid to stand up to their friends and their neighbors and their families. And not stand up and fight, but just stand for truth. Just stand and speak up for what you know is true. We have lost that.
Women, what do you think of this? So women, we've been taught through feminism that our career was going to be the most important. And so that we were going to leave our homes and go out into the community and work. And so then we were going to have daycare. And so there aren't as many people in the neighborhood. And I wonder whether some of this fear, because there isn't this close-knit community anymore where everybody knows the lady down the street, so that if you can tell if she needs help, you can just, because you're there. And if someone comes home and there's something heavy, there's someone is stuck in the snow, then everybody pushes. There's just people all around, and that isn't necessarily the case anymore. So people aren't in communities. They don't feel they're not arm in arm anymore. And we used to be. Even if you didn't like each other, really, you tolerated one another because you were all living together. It's not like that anymore.
mean, obviously, globally, everybody is moving around so much more.
Yeah, moving around so
You don't
much.
have those communities. But I think for a long time, what filled that gap were churches. And
Yeah.
so you had your church community, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but I know they are declining year after year in our country and around the world. And so now not only do you not have your community that you grew up in and your parents, know the other people's parents. Now you don't even have a church community. So you're losing your complete sense of community.
So you used to have this Sunday time where you all came together into the church and listened to God's word and were civil to one another, no matter what.
And you served one another. You served
Yeah.
people in your church community. You carried their burdens because that's what you've been commanded to do. If you're not going to church and you don't know your neighbor and you're not meeting in community groups, you don't even know they have a burden, let alone that you need to carry them.
The great thing about churches is there's the laws that you live by that are put down in the Bible that the church is based on. And those are written in the book, and the book doesn't change. And so then you know what's there. You know what the rules are. You know what's expected of you.
Truth.
Yeah.
It's truth.
And as soon as you, like this conference here, because it's based on truth, it's going very well. It's going very well. People are meeting one another in honesty and truth and sharing the information that they have. And it's easy and fruitful.
And it feels good.
And
I'm
everybody feels good, right?
Yeah, I'm not usually an emotionally driven or based person, but you can go in here right now and everybody's kind. And there's a lot of difference of opinions and thoughts in there. It's not, that's the one thing I'm surprised about being here is when you go to a more conservative leaning event in the United States, I think everybody really kind of thinks the same about all issues. There isn't a lot of variation. Here, because it's 72 countries, people from all over the world, it's fascinating to see that we may agree on what's important about family and society issues, but how we get there, I think there's been some differences and some healthy discussions on those. And to watch people in a joyful warrior way kind of debate them a little bit, it's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, and then go home from here and take what you have gleaned from here and put it into practice when you get home, because it's about the going home and putting it into practice that we are praying for, really, because all of this coming together right now is for everybody to find their own vision for their own community and to take it back and put it into action, because there is no overarching vision. And in church that's the case too, right? Because there's no overarching vision. There's more of a there's the groundwork in church. This is where you'll stop. You won't go beneath here. You won't lie. You won't cheat. You're not going. So you're and you're going to have God's will. So you're going to put your knees on the ground, and so So there's like getting you down there.
Yeah.
But whatever comes up from there, then is new and fresh.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I see that in our organization in some ways too. Like we just set basic parameters. Do it in a joyful way. Focus on your local community. Protect kids. Improve your public education system and defend parental rights. Like stay in that box. Do those things and do it in a way that you build relationships and you have lasting change. And then we just say, go forth.
How are the boys doing?
The boys?
Well, the boys in the education system haven't been nurtured for a very long time.
It's interesting. I think I put out a tweet not too long ago or a couple months ago about my concern about boys. I have 2 sons.
Yeah.
And so my concern for boys is elevated, I guess. I've watched them. I've watched them struggle and kind of try to maneuver through life right now. I remember my 15-year-old now, he came home 2nd grade, very young, 2nd or 3rd grade, so he was very young. And he said something about one of the girls in his class. And I said, what's wrong? Why don't you like her? What's your problem with her? And he said, every day she wears a shirt that says girl power. She thinks girls are better than boys, and I don't agree. What's wrong with that? And I thought, why does this bother you? What is the problem? And then I realized, I mean, it's just, boys are losing their path to success. They've been silenced. They've been shamed for being boys. Toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
They've been, and I was telling you before we started the program that my older son,
Right.
he lost his father. He had a lot of mental health issues following that. He was very confused. And he looked to your husband's videos on YouTube videos and podcasts and really told him it's okay to be a man. It's okay to stand up and to do this and to be comfortable in who you are, and you need to take charge of your life, and you need to do these things as a man. And I saw him change. I saw him change dramatically, and now he is thriving. And if you ask him, he attributes that to listening to your husband talk about how to be a man.
Yeah, tell the truth and go on the adventure of your life. Yeah, that's right. And
so the boys are struggling, to answer your question.
Yeah,
they're struggling.
they're struggling.
They need to see the role of a man as positive, not as something to be ashamed of, or that is toxic, or that they should be proud of it and embrace it.
And the whole idea of sexuality in the schools too, that should just be finished and done.
It's the worst thing plaguing the education system. I thought just in America, after being here for 3 days.
It's in Toronto.
It's
terrible.
It's the whole world. I talked to somebody from Kenya yesterday who said it's in their schools
together. Yeah,
It's everywhere.
In Kenya.
In
Wow, it's really widespread.
It's awful. It's awful. And they're doing it to be so nefarious. They're doing it to destabilize children and destabilize our families and destabilize our countries. And if it's happening on a global scale, where are we headed if parents don't get back in charge and in control and step in and do the things that need to be done to get these things out of schools? Parents
have to come home. They have to come home to their kids. You know, I mean, I stayed home with my kids when they were little, and I drew some portraits. I was a massage therapist. I had a table in my basement, so I was home when they came home. I was home at lunch. I was home after school. I wasn't making really enough money to put my kids in daycare, and we talked about it, and I wanted to stay home with my kids, so I did. And there were people that thought that I had more than 2 kids because all the other kids in the neighborhood would come to the house, and so people thought that and there was a meme when Jordan first became famous that I was a foster mother. I wasn't a foster mother.
It's because so many kids
I just had lots of kids because I was there. And we can figure out our lives. We can have children. We can still be engaged in life and do things that are important to us and be involved. There's the school board to be involved in. I'm sure there's hospital boards. There's all kinds of boards in the city, the library. I mean, there's all kinds of places to put your hand in and be helpful. And then you can also bring other kids into your home. And I liked that when my kids were little. I was in the States. I had no green card, so I couldn't work. So I took care of some other kids, and then my kids had friends every day. And it was good. So
great.
There's lots of things that we can do. We don't have to neglect our kids and go out and have our career and give our kids away to other people, especially when they're very young. You know, I've read, and I don't know what you know about the literature, but 0 to 3, kids should be with their parents. And what do you think of like daycare from 9 to 5?
So it's a great question for me because raised in the 80s ish, I thought I never wanted children. Wasn't even sure I wanted to be married.
Right.
I wanted a career.
I wasn't sure I wanted to be married either.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a baby.
Yeah, I didn't even want to. I was oldest of 4. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had these little kids around all the time. I was very much. I said I'm going to live in New York City. I'm going to have an apartment. I'm going to work. You know, this is what I thought for my future.
Yeah.
So I get married. I had my first child, and I'm so in love. So in love. And he had a stroke at birth. So not only am I so in love, I am so desperate for him to live and to thrive. Probably a little too desperate, honestly, now that I look back. And all I wanted to do was be home with that baby. But at this point, I had a degree, I had a career, and you're at this crossroads of what do I do? So made a choice to stay home with my baby, but then I went through a divorce. And so now he's 2, and I had to put him in daycare.
Oh, yeah, right.
Devastated me. I cried every day, dropped him off, cried all the way to work. And I worked for a few years till I remarried. But when I married my second husband, I knew, like, one of the parameters of marriage is I need to be home with my kids. Mm-hmm. And we had a son together, my second marriage, and I stayed home at that point. But being a woman that's kind of always on the go and always has to be involved in things, just what you said, any board I could serve on. I served on a board for a home of mothers that were pregnant and addicted to drugs. I served on anything at children to help feed them on weekends through backpack food. Like, I wanted to be involved and I wanted to do, but I was always able, because it was volunteer work, to bring my kids with me and show them too what good civic work looks like. So I think being home with your young ones, you never get that time back. It's so important.
I wonder if that's why there's fewer people doing civic work, is because women don't have the time anymore, because now they all have full-time jobs.
I believe that probably contributes to it.
Yeah, and sure. When you don't take on civic duties, then someone else will, and it won't be the people that you would have chosen. So,
yeah, I say, we were told in the 80s you can have it all.
Yeah, right. They still, I think, say that.
I think they may still say that, but I think a lot of us maybe are starting to speak up about that. You can have it all, just not at the same time.
Yeah, right.
Right now.
There's lots of time after
children are grown now, and my husband actually retired, so my 15-year-old still left at home. He's taken him to and from school, and I'm able to go and do this work. I'm able to come to London right now and participate now. Yeah. But 15 years ago, I would have to let my babies home to do that. Mm-hmm. And there's time. You can have it all, but not all at the same time.
No, and women live longer than men. So we have longer.
You have more time.
We have more time. Yeah. We probably have 7 more years than men do. So that 7 years that you might put in at the beginning to have your children, it evens itself out. So there's no rush. You don't have to feel guilty that you want to get married and have children and stay home and love your babies. You don't have to feel guilty about that.
Not at all. You should feel pride in that. And if you do need to work or want to work, you don't always have to work for an income. I've done so much volunteer work and work within my church in service, helping people with you can feel so much reward out of that. If you need to work for the income, find the balance, find things where you can do, like you became a massage therapist, find things that you can do. You could also be there for your children. It's so important.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything further that you'd like to say?
Oh my goodness, I could talk about children and families and our organization. We didn't really get into that a little bit.
Tell me a little bit more about your organization.
I would love to do that. So we launched 2.5, almost 3 years ago now. And we thought we were just going to be in Florida. We saw moms coming to school board meetings during COVID, so upset and frustrated, and they didn't know how to make change. They didn't even know who was really in charge or how to file complaints or to do any of those things. And so we launched Moms for Liberty to really empower parents and moms to understand what's going on in public school systems and with their government entities. And what's phenomenal about it is these women, we have 300 chapters in 48 states in the United States right now.
That's pretty much everywhere.
It's remarkable, and it's still growing. But 3 of those chapters have dads running them. We let dads in too, but it's mostly moms. These women, they're so amazing. They're so remarkable. Our Tennessee chapter, she's a former B-1 bomber pilot for the United States Air Force who now stays home with her kids. And she's running her Moms for Liberty chapter. And she says, this is now how I'm going to serve my country. So it's just beautiful to see. And the impact they're having. Stay-at-home moms now in Iowa have presidential candidates on their speed dial, on their cell phones, because they're in such an important early state, and they want to tap into the mom community and the mom vote. And these previously weren't political activists of any kind. Like I said, they haven't even really voted. And so just to watch the work they've done, they won 275 school board seats last year in the U.S., which is remarkable. We've got another 130 endorsements for next week for our elections in the U.S. And then in 7 different states, 24 bills our moms got behind and got passed and got signed into law that either stop gender ideology in schools, stop critical race theory in schools, make more transparency in curriculum in schools, or parental bill of rights. Those are huge things for our chapters, and they've been working on them, and we hope to expand that through the country.
So yeah, see that, and that's women's work. That sounds. I mean, it's not just women's work, but it definitely can be women's work.
It's changing communities.
Yeah,
it's impacting families, and it's making future brighter for kids and for our country. And so it's just important work.
Mm-hmm. Well, that must make you have a night's sleep every night and get
yes, I
look forward to the next day. I bet.
It's good work. The attacks are relentless. The hate.
Well, then you know you're doing something meaningful.
Yeah.
Right? There's a need there.
100%.
Well, all the best to you.
Thank you. I appreciate this time so much. It's been just a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure's mine.